technical parts of that. So I'm a farmer. Again, I want to get a little practical. So, and I'm going to ask specific questions, hopefully about very specific things. Not going to put anyone on the spot, but I mean, the first question is going to be: does it cost more, and how much? That's what we all want to know, right? We're going to fast forward to the end. We're not going to bore you with the last. We're going to go to the end. Does it work? And is it worth it? Does it cost more? How much does it cost? And then we'll talk about how do we do it. And that's what we want to do. So, kind of flexible. I get to be king for an hour, which is kind of fun. But I really wanted to kind of direct the conversation to what you guys care about. I mean, we all have our thoughts and feelings and experiences, but if they don't matter to you, we want to talk about something specific, and that's where we want the conversation to go. So even though I get to be king, it's a beneficial dictatorship. So 39 seconds about me. I'm on my third pair of Birkenstocks. I started organic farming in 1992. Vegetables, I wanted to save the world. I grow organic vegetables and help third world countries. And it turns out that doesn't make very much money. So I went to work initially at Jack London Gardens, which was an organic farm just over the hill from Benziger. We did that on the height of the salad mix craze, and so we did a lot of fun things there. And then went from there to the farmery, which was Sarah Lee Cundy's kind of pet project. And where Fog Line is now, we had 30 acres of organic vegetables and surrounded by their vineyards. Rich and Sarah Lee decided that because of the county and how favorable they are towards development and new businesses, decided that the organic vegetables really didn't pay a lot of money, and grapes were doing pretty dang good. So planted more vineyards, and out went the vegetables, and Chris went to work for Rich in the grape industry. So that's my introduction to the grape industry. 2006, I bought out my partner from Lloyd Vineyard Management and started on my own. And we farm 500 acres, 32 vineyards, all in Sonoma County, mostly Russian River and Bennett Valley. So when we talk about cold and wet, which that's going to be our theme today, right? Have some experience of that, but we don't farm anything in Petaluma, mostly because of range, not because I don't like Petaluma Gap. Try to keep things as close to my hub as possible. Of the 32 vineyards I farm, one of them is organic, and it's not certified, mostly because the wineries care about what we do, but they're not going to put it on the label. But 95% of the vineyards we farm are certified sustainable. I still eat granola. I still buy organic milk. So I have a heart towards it. But leading into this discussion, one of my, I guess, soapbox issues is I've never been able to farm organically the same or cheaper than conventionally. There's a reason most people farm conventionally, because it's more simple, less risky, and often more profitable. Often, not always. And so there's never been a pull from me, since I work for owners. Owners sell their grapes to a winery. Winery sells their bottles of wine to us. In vegetables and fruits, there's been a pull from the consumer. It says, listen, I'm willing to pay $1 more a gallon for milk. I'm willing to pay 39 cents more a pound for radishes or whatever. There's been a pull. And there hasn't been that pull on a big scale that I've seen from the market. That's changing, so that's one thing we want to talk about today. And I work for owners, and owners got to pay me, and they got to pay their bills. And so, philosophically, I'm on the same page, but we also have to, everyone has to make a living at the end of the day. So that's why of the 32 vineyards I farm, one of them is organic. But we made a company commitment, and I imposed this on my clients to not use pre-emergent herbicides. We do certified sustainable practices, so we do all the other things and just don't use the name. But at the end of the day, yeah, do I spray Roundup? I do. Am I getting away from it? Absolutely. 15 years trying to figure out what the next best thing is, so hopefully we can share some of that today. Oh, talk louder? I can do that. Hi. All right, so that's me, and so I guess do you have any initial thoughts about why you don't come to vacation, or anything else you want to share before we start getting into the meat of it?
Yeah, I'm Sophie Drucker. I manage all the estate vineyards for the Bosse family. So that includes Raymond Vineyards out in the Napa Valley, Deloche Vineyards in the Russian River. I don't farm anything in the Petaluma Gap, but I do have some experience with wet, cold areas. My coming to organics. So I studied viticulture enology at Davis, and then worked abroad and around doing some internships. And I think, I think my love for organics is more informed by maybe my childhood and gardening with my family and my love of nature and just kind of all things natural. So I was just drawn to it. I did a harvest in Portugal and worked with some really old school farmers who don't use a lot of chemicals, because they don't need to. It's really hot there, and so it kind of organic farming is just ingrained in what they've been doing for generations. But coming back, to the States, I finished my master's at Davis in horticulture and agronomy, and I started working with the Bosse family, and so I was brought into the fold of organic and biodynamic farming, learning a lot about both kinds of farming, especially the biodynamic side. Almost everything I farm is certified organic and biodynamic, but I do have one vineyard that is just certified sustainable fish-friendly farming. And so I definitely have some opinions on, what makes sense to do where, because a lot of it comes down to economics.
Pairs of bourbon stock have you had?
I don't think I've ever owned a pair of bourbon stock. I have a pair of Mephistos. Is those kind of the same thing.
I think you're covered.
Yeah, I think so too. What were the
I
other
think
questions?
that's it.
That's it.
You got
Okay.
it.
So yeah.
So I'm Anna Keller from Keller Estate, and the reason I was interested in being on the panel was we planted our vineyard in 1989, so we're coming up on our 30th anniversary this year. And that vineyard is still the same, it's still producing our La Cruz Chardonnay and our La Cruz Pinot Noir. So we're very happy with that we've been able to maintain the vineyard 30 years in, but we know that farming it smarter, a few years ago we realized that we needed to start farming smarter so that we could continue giving longevity to our vineyards. That was one of the reasons why we did it. The real aha moment came when, throughout the drought, I would see between the cracks, cold, wet, clay. I would add that to the conversation that at least we have in our section of the Petaluma Gap is heavy clay soils. And when the drought was at its best, you could see cracks all the way down, and everything that implied, and water management. And that in combination with, I could see what Roundup was doing, and just all of those things really propelled us to start analyzing it. But my goal is to share it from a business perspective today. Not only the cost, the human costs, the costs there's many ways of looking at costs, and for me that's an area that is really something that I want to share what we've done. I probably own one pair of Birkenstocks. They've lasted about 10 years, so I guess I don't wear them that often.
Hi there, I'm Rita DeBursa. I'm the manager here at McEvoy Ranch, and also I want to welcome you to come anytime and ask more about the ranch after if you're curious about what we grow here, because it's kind of hard to see in the rain. But thank you for coming. I have a real joy that I get to work at a place that kind of has the same values as me philosophically, which is an organic. We're not biodynamic, we are certified CCOF organic, and we have been for over 2 decades. And we kind of have it in a good cycle now. Getting it certified was quite a chore, but the fact that I've only been here for 3 years, and I'm really blessed that they have such a good system here. It's working for the brand, and so that is part of why we're organic, not only because we're good land stewards and we're land stewards for the McEvoy family. That's why we originally became organic, but also because it's part of our branding as an organic olive oil or organic wine. But for me, I have been seeking out working for something under my same values since I moved to California. So I feel really special and lucky to work at a place that holds the same ethos. When we moved and shifted from it being pasture and cattle land, as all of the hills are around here, to becoming an olive ranch and a vineyard, the biggest thing was just soil management. From that was our perspective, is we had to build it up because of the heavy clay soils and the cracks, and you can really see the organic matter over the years. It's been really impressive. So I can talk on a very practical side and economics always. But yeah, welcome and thank you.
Hi, I'm Armin Azevedo. I'm with Wilbur Ellis, and Wilbur Ellis is a chemical distributor, and we distribute organic and conventional chemistry. So I'm kind of like the arms dealers to the universe of growers. And my job is to make my customers happy and to mesh with their goals. So if their goals are to be farming profitably and conventionally, or profitably and organically, my goal is to help them fulfill their desires. So I like to say all the time, it's just farming. It's hard work. I'm also, Scott knows this, we're talking about this, I'm also on the youth baseball board, and all the city folk were freaking out because we're in playoffs and we're trying to wrap our season up before Memorial Day, and we've got this rainfall. And I just put out there on the group chat, hey, Mother Nature always bats last. You know, it is what it is. If you think it's hard that your kid can't play baseball because it's wet, think about all the farmers around here that are dealing with this right now. My past background is I grew up on a farm in the Central Valley. I farmed there with my family, went to college at Fresno State, farmed for 7 years with my family. As you all know, the pleasures of dealing with family. It's great on paper, and I took the opportunity to expand my horizons, and I went to work for a chemical company back in the Midwest, a manufacturing company. And I got to spend 7 years in the field of dealing with synthetic chemistry. There were a lot of fits and starts things. Oh, we're working on a spider venom type insecticide, and the scale of it is really difficult when you deal with the large biopharma or pharmaceutical companies that are health science companies, that are chemical companies. They're looking at huge acres. They're dealing with millions of acres or tens of millions of acres of soybeans. So in the U.S., corn drives the whole market. 70 million acres of corn. Soybeans, the next one, 50 million acres of soybeans. I have a very good friend of mine who recently cashed out his business a few years back, has some extra money, and he's like, hey, I want to short Monsanto and Bayer stock because of this glyphosate thing. Because nobody's going to use glyphosate in vineyards anymore. And it was, okay, look, slow your roll. There's maybe 1 million acres of vines in California. When you spray herbicide, you're really spraying maybe 25 to 30% of the acre just under the vine. So we're talking 300,000 acres. That's one county, half of a county in Iowa of corn and soybeans. So now getting down to reality with where we're at here today, the market is dictating, especially on production agriculture, that we move to more organic, more holistic, more sustainable type of products and choices we make. Again, it's all farming. It's ain't no jug or bag of something that's gonna get your butt out of the fire. It takes farming. It takes managing your soil, managing your organic matter, managing your nutrition. One of the aha moments for me is our company deals in, we're predominantly along the West Coast. Wilbur Ellis is privately held, family members live in the Bay Area, our headquarters is in San Francisco. We had a national meeting and we invited a grower panel. One of the grower panel constituents was from Salinas Valley, and they do organic production. And when we asked him about organic production, he said, you know, the biggest lesson I learned when we first started, it's like, we're gonna go put our organic production on the crummy ground. We learned really fast is you gotta put your organic production on your best ground. And you gotta take really good care of it. And then when people started asking, you know, you think about vegetables, or organic artichokes, or celery, you know, those are driven by nitrogen. And somebody asked, well, what do you do for organic nitrogen in those? We give them so many pounds of nitrogen. Well, that's expensive in organic. Yeah, that's why it costs double for organic, fill in the blank. So there are certain things on a small scale you can do with compost. There are certain things, as you get into larger scale production, it gets more difficult. It gets more challenging. Being small, being nimble is a good thing, because organic production, Petaluma Gap, is going to be a challenge, and you're not going to outcompete the Constellations, Gallows, KJs, wine groups of the world on farming it cheaper and growing more tons of it. So you have to be nimble and you have to be creative about how you go about doing this. So that's been the lesson I've learned so far.
Right on. Thanks, Herman. Thanks, guys. So, getting to a couple of the points we've all talked about. First of all is, one, is it economic to farm organically in the Petaluma Gap? Does it cost more? Does it cost less? Does it cost the same? And is it worth it emotionally, psychologically, and economically at the end of the day? And I'm just going to let whoever wants to jump in first jump in.
I think that yes, spraying twice as much, if not 3 times as much, is more money when you are an organic producer. For us, it is part of our branding, and so it's already written into the cost of goods, written into the economics of the land, and so the cost per acre is higher, and that is reflected in our product. But we make premium products, so we're not making a bottle of wine that is below $10 or olive oil the same. So that's kind of what we've always been moving toward. For
And
me,
you guys don't make a small amount of oil either.
no, yeah, we used to have 100 acres here. We have 60 acres of olives and just over 30 of grapes. And we mostly sell our grapes to really high-end wineries that want Petaluma Gap and want organic production and want a Marin product. But for us, what I'm noticing more and more now that we kind of have our great structure for organic production, the bigger challenge, I think, is the challenge of all farmers, which is Mother Nature and labor. We have to have operators working all the time, every single day, starting from April 1st until harvest. You know, so that's making sure we can have the right labor. And I mean, I visited so many places in Sonoma trying to understand the cost per acre and trying to understand where I can save. And at the end of the day, for me to have a fog, where the fog just came in right now, and the cold and the wet, and then we also get really big heat waves, just like folks in Geyserville do, is just making sure that we can, you know, I'll wake up at 2 a.m. and be like, oh God, we have to spray, you know, or something very intensely. And I think that that stress is worth it because all of our workers are really invested in how well we care for the land. And it's part of the brand going forward.
Do you farm any non-organic grapes here?
No. No. A few years ago, I did a survey on how important it is to people, our buyers, if we're CCUF certified or if we're Petaluma GAP AVA, and every single one said, unfortunately, they said Petaluma GAP AVA was more important to them than being in CCUF. That didn't change us. We didn't move away from the certification because it's actually not that hard once we're already in it. Yeah, that was kind of an interesting light for me.
So from a marketing perspective, do your winery clients, they like the fact that it's organic? Do they buy from you because, or would they buy from you anyway, they just feel better about it?
I think they feel good about it, but I think that the fact that we place so much care into our growing of the grapes and so much detail is why they buy the grapes. I think that they also really enjoy the cool climate Pinot that we grow, just like everybody else here. So I'm not exactly sure, but yeah.
But there's no direct incentive, like, hey, listen, if you guys we're going conventional, we pay you less per ton, or
No,
there's not a push incentive.
no.
Okay.
So I'd like to add something. We grow grapes, we sell a portion of our grapes, and we keep a portion of our grapes for Keller Estate. And with last year's big harvest, we knew it was coming, but we lost a very big client. And in that loss, all of a sudden, we found ourselves with 60 tons of fruit on our hands, which will happen to anybody who sells to a large producer, right? So I've always said, make sure you diversify and get smaller clients, which then it has a problem because you have a lot of small pigs, right? Nothing is perfect. But I did realize in having to go out and find new clients this year after having lost that big client, that having organic farming was a great way to get smaller, more boutique wineries interested in the fruit. That they were going to pay more. They were, maybe 5-10% more, maybe, but not really, but it was interesting to them, and it helped us diversify. So the big client didn't really care if we were organic or not. The smaller clients really are going to add it to their label. So I think that's something that's important to realize, that it's going to change who buys grapes from you.
That's true.
So we, for the Deloche label, we buy fruit from the Petaluma Gap, and we work with a handful of vineyards in the Petaluma Gap. The only organic one being Isaiah, which is McEvoy Vineyard. And we offer our growers a bonus for maintaining CCUF certification. We do seek out organic fruit, and we highlight that in our production. So the Isaiah fruit, for example, will be bottled as a single vineyard designate, and our vineyard designates tend to be smaller production wines that are sold DTC. So I think it's really hard to convey, with a larger bottling to the market that it's made with organic fruit and that there's value there. Because I think, when it's sitting in Safeway on the shelf, people go for the design, they go for name recognition. They don't pick the bottle and turn it up. And that's the only place where you're gonna see made with organic grapes. And so it really has to be a product that's hand sold for the organic grape component to come into play and to matter to the consumer. I think, it can also be something that has value when it's on a wine list that's more curated, or in a wine shop that that values that kind of stuff. So I think the buyer can really have a preference for organics, and the consumer when it's a hand-sold product. But on a bigger thing, like you're saying, with the bigger clients, I think that stuff tends to get lost.
Well, we'll see if that changes with all the lawsuits and all that stuff in the news, right? Let's talk frankly. One of the about cost, whatever you guys feel like you're comfortable sharing. Do you have a guess? If you had to throw a number at a wall whatever your vineyard you're farming or buying fruit from on a acre basis and a ton basis, it's more expensive, do we all agree?
Yes.
Is it a lot, a little, 5%, 10%, 50, 200%? And we talked about an extra 2 sprays.
Can we split it into 2 areas?
Please.
Labor and product?
Sure.
Because I think that, it's one of the things is as soon as you start the organic conversation, the first thing people say is like, it's gonna be more expensive. And it's like, it's a block in the conversation. And I think splitting it up into what is more expensive and how to make it work is really important.
Absolutely. Well, that's what we're gonna talk about tricks a little later, right? But go ahead.
Yep, that's good. We'll let it move around.
It is more expensive, however, that's dependent. So,
What does it depend on, Armin?
variety. So specifically, because, in the conventional or sustainable world, foundational products we use are sulfur, oil, copper, on a pest management, fungus management. So those are foundational, because what we're finding out is with certain synthetic chemistry is that there's mutations occur in the vineyard and that we're running into resistance developing to certain of the fungicides. Just, when you start manipulating nature, that happens. And so in order to get out of that is you're putting in sulfur or oil as an additive, because in 2,000 years, mildews, over 2,000 years of recorded viticulture, mildews never developed resistance to sulfur. A lot of these products, now sulfur is kind of got there's tricks to it. So there's trade-offs with everything, because in really cold weather, sulfur doesn't work that well. In really hot weather, it works too well, and you'll get a free leafing pass now.
So, would you just interrupt real quick? Would you say that in your experience with growers that the economic difference between organic vineyard and non-organic vineyard is mostly in labor? Is it mostly in chemistry? Is it mostly in...
I would say it's labor. I would say it's labor from the standpoint of you're going to have more frequent applications.
Okay.
So, and they're being applied by somebody driving a tractor, most likely. I can agree on that. It was interesting, one of the Facebook things I was reading the other day, they were talking about organic farming actually increases your carbon footprint by 20%. So, and it's years ago, early 2000, when I first got here, one of my customers was really big. They were mandated you're going to be organic, X percentage of your acres are organic. The problem was management gave them a conventional farming budget. And so what we saw, I remember talking with the guys that were in management on like boots on the ground, is they grew less tons, poor quality fruit, more expensive. When I looked at just cost of goods, it's probably 50% increase. If you try to if you're in a high pressure zone, if you're growing something like a Clone 4 Chardonnay organically, you're going to be living on a tractor. And you're going to need to leaf it, because that's the purebred sheep or the purebred dog of the grape world. It wants to get sick and get disease. It also produces bounteously. So you get into certain other varieties, like a Sauvignon Blanc, for instance. That's a little bit more tolerant. It's really varietal specific. Now, when you start getting into the realm of botrytis, some of the organic botrycide, botrytis materials are just as effective as the synthetic ones. They just don't last as long. So when we typically, if you look at the UC powdery mildew model and what they say in frequency of application. If you're under severe pressure on that index is a synthetic chemical you can run, they suggest 14 days. If you're under severe pressure with a organic, biological type of product, 5 to 7 days is what their treatment interval is. So, and at the cost of application, what is the cost of application?
Depends if you're paying me or you're doing it yourself.
Yeah, paying you.
Between 50 and 70 bucks an acre.
Yeah, that's standard. That's pretty standard what I hear, so.
If you're sulfur dusting, it's a lot less than that. But
Right.
No, is anyone sulfur dusting in Petaluma?
Oh, yeah.
We do it here.
You
But-
do yours?
Yeah, it's,
Okay.
I mean, I strive for it.
Okay. That's why I'm not a presenter, I'm a moderator, because I don't farm down here. I would have assumed that wettable would be your main.
Yeah, I mean, it is our main, but I hope in hearing for sulfur dust, it's a lot cheaper, it's faster, and I mean, last year, we had absolutely no mildew, and I definitely attribute it to the sulfur dust. And you're on a 5 to 7 day window.
Right.
Which, yeah, I would say for our farming, and if I'm speaking just for, I know I have to sometimes separate out the olives, because we don't spray like that in the olive trees. In the vines, we spray, right, 5 to 7 days, but the problem is we do have to wait for the good weather all the time, and we have hillside farming. And so take into that into account, I would say our costs are about 33% more than conventional, if you're wondering for
All in or just for the spraying part?
all in. And I would say, you were talking about sulfur, copper, and oil. Those are our favorite things that we spray here, and they're organic, and they're really easy, and if we keep on a good regimen, we're great. But the biggest thing for us is fertilizer. We need to put in a lot of nitrogen and a lot of organic fertilization here, and to keep up with the load that we're taking out of the land, and that is where our costs come in very, very strong.
Do you farm yourselves or is it contracted?
We contract about 20% of our work. The rest is done by hand with our guys here.
So, and Sophie, do you guys want to talk about
So-
the cost?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about dusting as well, something that I've started doing. So the one vineyard that I have that I'm not farming organically is in Jameson Canyon. So it's the south end of Napa. It's very close to the bay. I usually have fog rolling in the afternoon. I think would be my most comparable vineyard to the Petaluma Gap. It might get a little bit warmer, but it's windy and it's damp. And fog rolling in the afternoon, sometimes not clearing up till 11, 12 a.m. So, it's a small window. And I'm farming a lot of Clone 4 Chardonnay.
Yeah.
So it is being farmed conventionally, but I have brought in the use of sulfur dust, and we always have mildew problems there, and the dust has been amazing. So, there's a window I can usually swap out at least 3 sprays, and I tighten my intervals a bit, so I'm 7 to 10 days. But I can get away with that, and it's so effective and it's so great. So my spray program there is comparable to my organic spray program in St. Helena, but it is less expensive than my organic spray program in the Russian River. So that gives you kind of an idea of.
So in St. Helena, you're mainly Bordeaux varieties?
Yeah, Bordeaux varieties, which are much easier and a lot more dust. And yeah, so I'm usually under 300 an acre there.
Right.
But down in Jameson Canyon, I'm usually running about 350, which is, well, pretty similar to my organic program in the Russian River.
Well, yeah, I was gonna also say on top of that with varieties, we grow a lot of Pinot here in the Petaluma Gap, but there's also Syrah, which is kind of a beautiful variety to grow here because it is so easy and so nice and such a great fresh breath of fresh air for
And easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, last year the clusters were a lot tighter, but I could have probably lowered.
What about weed management? Because that's,
We're
That's
getting
exactly what I was going to say.
So, we've done those sprays.
The only thing what I'd like to add is, before we go into sprays, one of the things things that we did, so we've been in the transformation of becoming organic for the past 4 years. So we've tried a lot of different things, and one of the things that really helped us manage the budget as we get to know it was to see where we could cut costs. And as many of the farmers in this area, we have to net because we have a lot of bird pressure. So for us, one of the key things was finding ways that we could mechanize one operation that maybe had nothing to do with organics, but that would free up, we farm our 95 acres ourselves. So that would free our crew and allow them to do other things. So last year, after Griffin's Lair had, we had actually, the Petaluma guy, we had that seminar where we had the laser light guys come out and show us. It had worked at Griffin's Lair, so we started doing it last year, and we found that it was working well. We're expanding it, so now we do not net. We net about 15% of the vineyard just because they're outliers, but that has saved us 3,000 man-hours. So the way I put it is, I'm not really saving them, I'm just using them somewhere else. But I think that's, that's part of being creative, because we don't have our costs yet constant and we can't compare, and we're still in the transformation process. It's been one of the tools that we've used to see if it makes sense or not for us.
Yeah, that's the same for me. I have in the budget to buy a leafer in hopes of just cutting one pass through the vineyard will save us 1 million hours of doing something else. Maybe fixing something, maybe the wire, there's always the repair also. So.
All right, so talk about costs associated with weed management.
So that's probably one of my, if not my biggest increase in farming costs is weed management. So we run a Clemens. In a spring like this, where I have weeds that are like a good foot taller than my fruiting zone, I had to, we seeded with, just like a beans, peas, and oats mix. And those oats, they kick my sensor on the Clemens. So we had to go in and literally knock stuff down manually so we could run the Clemens in. And we had to do about 4 passes before we saw, effective control. So that, you talk about the carbon cost of that, it's huge.
So much. And the compaction on your soil.
And the compaction on the soil and the labor hours and, it's just a lot. So.
Is it working very on hillsides? I mean, that seems to be a mechanical problem.
No, it's really challenging on hillsides.
We have a Germania here that is really great for hillside farming under the vine.
Yeah.
But again, it takes forever.
Yeah, it's really slow.
Yeah.
What do you run at an hour? Like you do like 2 acres an hour?
No, it's 1.
1 an hour? Yeah.
At the most.
Yeah.
I own one too.
Yeah.
So,
So.
go ahead.
Rita, you have sort of clay soils here. How does that
Absolutely.
Germania work? Because
Well,
I
the
see-
problem with that is if you don't get it at the right time with the Germania, they have these blades on them. You just run the blades down. So you have to get the perfect timing. Now all of a sudden it's raining again, so I'm probably gonna have to do it again, which really stinks. But the problem is just the cost, It's the guy, the labor. You lose a guy for a month, basically, to do all of it. And then you have to replace the blades because the clay is so heavy and so durable. So it's just expensive. Yeah.
Anybody using any alternative thing besides a manual cultivation?
So in January, we went to Unified, and I went straight up to the guy from Suppress, because we tried Suppress last year, which is 5-6 times more expensive than Roundup, or at least 5 times, really.
Is it, Armin?
How
How
much?
much more is it?
And I asked him
It is.
straight out, I said, it didn't work. Why didn't it work? And he asked me, and we talked about pH, rate of application, and he said, yeah, it really doesn't work that well. So it was, I was like, oh, I don't want to call the company, take this
All right, welcome to the Petaluma Gap. We're not going to be organic anymore, moderated talk. It's so expensive and it doesn't work.
But however, we went there looking for equipment, and one of the things that we found is that, at least one of the things that I learned was, a Clemens and a Germania, those are going to work the soil under the vine, which in the clay soils is really hard. You can also, we ended up buying a sunflower, which is pulling out the woods without really working the soil. So we're not working the soil, we're taking care of the weeds, if that makes it, So I think also, and that has helped us do a first pass We know we eventually need to work the soil under the vine, which is going to be another stage, but I think, and we go at 2.5, 3 miles per acre, so we're getting the work done. We tried sheep, so the first year we got 20 sheep and had really great barbacoa, because they didn't do the trick. 20, for 95 acres, we realized that it's, using other, sustainable helpers. Well, you don't pay them health care, and if they die, you don't really panic, which is a great thing. But what we did is we found a partner who's willing to raise sheep, and we're now up to 230 head, and they can do our vineyard in 3 weeks, the 90 acres. We've got to start them at the right time. It gave us a head start this year, so it allowed us to breathe. But as soon as there was any green on the vines, they were having brunch. So it did help, but I think that's how we've been kind of managing both sides of weed management.
I've heard good things about Weed Slayer, Armin.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah,
We're
really excited.
we're leaving everything for Armin.
Yeah, so organic weed control is, till recently, it's kind of been an oxymoron. There's a product that recently has come out, Weed Slayer. We looked at it this last year. We used quite a bit of it. It is an effective product. The timing on it is, from what we've seen, I've had conventional growers using it. People in Napa that farm conventionally but don't want to use herbicides, people that don't want to use Roundup at all. It's effective. Cost per acre, you're probably looking, like about $150, $200 a sprayed acre, but it is effective. However,
Just for the material.
just for the material.
And you figure
But you're
roughly
putting it out,
20% of your acreage is sprayed.
yeah. So I mean, when I was pricing it out for a management company recently, it was like $45, $50 per vineyard acre. Okay, so that being said, really cool, sham wow. So the problem is, and we're undergoing this sea change in the chemical industry. As I mentioned, we've had consolidation happening at the manufacturing level, and all these people care about is the big row crop acres. So EPA a few years ago came up with this ruling that it's called a FIFRA, F-I-F-R-A 25B list. And these are products that EPA has ruled is generally safe. And because of that, they don't require as much registration work. So whenever you bring a new product out, so the new Bolin-esque product that controls every pest known to man. Yes. And it's since that, you just spray it one time, you never have to go back out in the vineyard again until harvest. Okay? That's going to take that company at least 7 years to bring it to market, and it's going to cost $500 million. And the patent on the product is only good for 15 years. So day one, when you get a registration, you now have to go to all the countries in the world and get a MRL for that product. That's maximum residue level. So they test you can use up to this amount, this many days before harvest, and your expert tolerance is this. So you get a registration, you got a patent, you got a product, you bring it to market, and then the clock is you've already burned through half the life of that product. And then in 7, 8 more years, it's going to go off patent, and somebody from China can cook it up in their factory. So the companies, for that investment, they're going to only go after blockbusters. They're only going to go after things that they're going to be able to capture their investment, because they have shareholders that all want to drive and go vacation in Tahoe or Maui or wherever. So they have to charge that to get their money out of those products. With the FIFRA 25B, there's about 25 products on this list that are exempt, and somebody that's a good chemist, a good agronomist, can come up with a product. And so clove oil is one of those products on this list. Clove oil, when you combine it with a biosurfactant, it works like a really good contact herbicide. So I recently did a trial, our company's got a research division, we did a trial, 15 different treatments, and the weed slayer of the straight organics looked the best. When we combined weed slayer with synthetic chemistry, it made the synthetic chemistry look better. So now the problem is because these companies are new and novel and they're not used to all the regulations, the state of California is the only state that requires adjuvants to be registered. So their adjuvant, they sell it as a Part A and a Part B, their adjuvant has to get registered. So now it's on a do not sell. And they've pulled registration until, well, they've stopped sales until that gets done. So, but when it comes back, it's going to be a very useful tool. Somebody will come up with a clove oil product or something and a biosurfactant. The barriers to entry are just being a good chemist and coming up with something. And figuring out a manufacturing process and having a really cool printer that you can print labels. But with the regulations you have to follow. So weed slayer, very good, very effective. It is a game changer because because with all the glyphosate issues, we've got even conventional growers that are stopping use of glyphosate. And they're trying to find what's going to be that replacement product. So, yes, sir.
Was weed slayer effective on more mature, taller weeds? That seems to be the Achilles heel.
That is a really good question. So thank you for asking. Because again, no jug, no bag is going to get you out of trouble. So why we get resistance to certain things, even if they're synthetic, is because everything's tested. If you read labels, which I've had to, they say 2 to 3 inches you can go this rate. 6 inches you have to go this rate. 1 foot, you're vaya con Dios.
And that goes for Roundup as well.
Roundup as well.
You're talking.
Yep, Roundup. And so the trick is what I've seen. So I've got one of my customers is like they're certified on everything. CCOF is not rigorous enough for them. They go to some other even more rigorous organic certification process. And what they found is you have to start when the weeds are small. I remember working with Fetzer years ago, and in November, after we had like post-harvest rains, they're out there running their sunflower. They're going like 5 miles an hour. And I was talking to the manager, this is Raphael, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? I've never seen a sunflower go that fast. Because the soil's right, there's enough moisture, the weeds are small, we can blow through there, pull everything out, we turn back around, we go the other way, we're done for the winter. And then that soil's already kind of conditioned, and now we can go in and do it. You talk to some sustainable farmers, guys that are they're growing clone flower in Alexander Valley, and they're trying to get max production and have clean fruit. They all talk about this. There's like 1 week, maybe 3 or 4 days this year, the soil's just right that you can disc. So it's really...
But I'll go on a limb, Armin, and say, in Petaluma Gap, the chances you get that are probably next to nothing, right?
Yep.
I mean, cold, wet, clay.
Yeah.
Those are your 3 enemies against any kind of manual cultivation anytime you're including now.
Yeah.
So you have to come up with, we view sheep as a knockdown. You have to come up with something that knocks that weed from this to this, or prevents it from getting this to this.
Well, I think glyphosate does, don't you?
It does.
We started so we weren't able to get the sheep into all the blocks And so the blocks, there's actually one block where we were able to use them for half and pull them out because they were eating the shoots. And we could see a difference in the growth of the weeds. So they did knock them down significant enough for it to be a lot easier to pass with the sunflower later on. So they did do a...
There was a really interesting talk in some place to Google, look it up, as Piscinus Ranch. Were you at that, Sophie? So they had the guy talking, the vineyard manager, the livestock manager talking in Napa, the Farm Bureau function for brick growers. And they're kind of in an isolated area, similar to Petaluma Gap, hotter, but they actually established their vineyards in such a way that it's conducive to running sheep out there. So it's not plant meter by meter, Burgundy style, like 2 feet off the ground and run sheep in there. That's kind of like, you're gonna have really happy sheep. But they set up almost a high wire trellis system. So the sheep can't get to it, and intensively. I think it goes back to like reading Michael Pollan's book.
Yeah, mock grazing, right?
Yeah, he was talking about how that one farm back in Virginia, how you mass amount of livestock in one area, graze it down, and you move it. So the management on that aspect. But yes.
Yeah, we've got 800 acres in the Petaluma Gap and Carneros. We use sheep. We get them around the vineyard twice before bud break. So you get them straight after harvest once the leaves are gone, and then you get them again before bud break, and then they don't come in until later on in the season.
And do you subcontract that out, or do you do that yourself?
We've got our own sheep and stuff like that, and and it's management. Like the sheep are lazy fucks. You've got to organize them, and like you've
That's
got
a technical term.
yeah, you've got to like have small blocks where you're moving them through because they'll take the tops of the hills, they'll take the bottoms of the hills, they won't do the hillsides and stuff like
And
that.
they'll graze selectively, so
Exactly.
they'll eat what they like and they'll leave all the unpleasant weeds.
You've got to manage them. You're moving them every other day almost in small blocks and making sure it's all knocked down.
And it's super critical for soil health also, to have them on the land and to get the job done and then to move them off and let the land
Yeah.
rest.
So it is a management component. So you are paying a guy, and we have dogs to protect them from the coyotes and stuff like that. And so it's a lot.
What Kevin has done at Piscinus is really cool too, because he can have the sheep in the vineyard year round, and he also has kind of a sprawl canopy, and so he has it set up perfectly so that they will reach up and they'll basically do the hedging.
Oh, wow.
So they keep the shoots at the ideal length. His goal is to set up an ecosystem that's self-managing, and so
Yeah.
what they have to do for labor and coming in is as minimal as possible. It's really cool.
I can tell you in a 5-acre experiment with baby doll sheep over 5 years, about 30% of my gray hairs are because we were fighting, trying to keep the sheep out of the canopy and keep them in all year long. And we tried everything, from a 50-inch cordon, which my shortest people need sticks to lift the wires on, to harnesses on the sheep's face and their thing to keep them from reaching up, to spraying capsicum on the vines so that they wouldn't eat them. We tried all that stuff, and all those sheep are now in someone's tummy somewhere. So even on a small scale, it's very challenging. On a larger scale, I think appropriate raising, so we were trying to do them all year long.
Yeah.
I can tell you, don't do that.
Yeah, we take them off the properties
Yeah.
to bigger
So
ranches where they'll
you're talking
graze,
about
and then we bring them back down for leaf plucking because they'll leaf pluck.
So a strategy to keep this weed from getting to this weed is probably fair, especially if there's a rotational.
It looks good, and when it's too wet to get in the vineyard, it's great because the sheep can do it, and then our weeds aren't out of control when the soil dries out.
Yeah, one of the things that I always thought would be really cool is to have a relationship with an independent shepherd that would come in and do a vineyard maybe in the wintertime and maybe an apple orchard in the summertime, and then they would sell organic lambs. I mean, it would be part of an ecosystem approach or local approach to an issue. So that's always kind of been my dream, is to establish that kind of thing. They're making money on selling lamb and wool and things like that, and we're getting the benefit out of the weed.
We have a really small flock of sheep that we use to graze kind of aisles and stuff outside the vineyard, but we don't have enough sheep because we don't have any land to put them on. nuts.
Land's so cheap around here, why not?
So we need to find shepherds to work with, but I also need to find,
Just drop off at Ria's place.
there we go.
They're here now, did you guys see them?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't come through into our crops.
So, does anybody know how many sheep per acre you need? I mean, if you're doing it just during the.
We did a 20-acre block with 80 sheep,
Hundreds.
and we were moving them every 3 days, so, again,
How
it's
big?
about, 20 acres.
But how big was the area that they're grazing at one time? Because you're saying.
Not more than 2 acres. So 2 acre, because you really, again, you want them in and out fast.
Right.
So what we would do is we would set the nets ahead of time so that we'd spend 1 day just setting up, we invested in nets, fencing. So we invested in the fencing so that we could set it up and then just move them from one place to the other fast enough as soon as we felt they could be done doing that. But again, there are a lot of, we contracted out and we do have enough space and we have ravines where we put them into the ravines. So there's ways of managing the size and the places where they graze throughout the year. But I would say that for 80, did 20 acres well. 80 sheep.
Let's talk about nutrition real quick.
And they fertilized.
Yeah, and my nutrition. I mean, one of the things that was a challenge for me in my early career was to find an organic equivalent to all these conventional foliar, especially foliar sprays, but even drip apply. When I started 20 years ago, you could not buy a foliar potassium product that was worth anything, and that's changed. Back when I started 20 years ago, you said humic acid to someone like Armin, and he's like, what's that?
Well, over 20 years ago, bro.
And so, not Armin, of course, but someone. So I think the technology and the beliefs and the philosophies of organic viticulture, organic agriculture are transferred, and you can buy conventional foliar humic acid products. We didn't have those a long time ago. So I think that's come a long way, which is very encouraging to me. I mean, I always went to my PCA and said, hey, listen, I have this other organic vendor. What's my favorite foliar nitrogen product? Oh yeah, here we go. It's right here. It's like, whoa, there wasn't that 20. Well, there was, but you had to make it yourself. So, and it was awful and stinky and all that stuff. So that's very encouraging. Do you guys have any products that or techniques for either foliar or soil nutrition that you're in love with, that you work well? We're not usually too worried about nitrogen in vineyards specifically, which you are in other crops that you are mentioned. Anything that you guys find effective, helpful?
Love the seaweed products.
Okay.
Yeah, we keep
Foliarly or?
foliar. Yeah, foliar. So we keep. I keep foliar. I keep one of the seaweed products in my sprays pretty much from my pre-blooms through the end of my spray season.
And what do you feel like it does for you?
I think that definitely the potassium just supports my vines because that's usually one of my biggest issues is nutrient issues is potassium. But the BioLink products are great. I mean, I don't feel, they're expensive, but I don't feel like I'm, between compost and cover cropping and some fertilizers, some fertigation, I don't feel like I'm lacking for options.
Yes, I feel like there's almost too much to decide from.
Yeah.
But for us, it's, I think, setting your program in your organic vineyard is really important. So we're no-till here. We really push on getting compost, organic matter, no-till, all of our cultivation, everything wrapped up, so we don't actually have to play catch-up every year with foliar. I use the Excite seaweed in almost all of my sprays for the entire ranch up until fruit set, or no bloom. And then occasionally I spray boron, and usually it's good. But I think there's other issues that we battle here than nutrition.
So I went on a trip to New Zealand, and one of the things that we did was intentionally spend 3 days at certified organic biodynamic vineyards. of the level that we're talking about in terms of grape and wine prices. And one of my favorite stories was driving into this unnamed winery, I'll tell you over a glass of wine, and seeing mildew from the driveway. And then talking to my compatriot who was with me, who was also a good grower, and went, "Oh my God, Paul, what do we do?" He said, "You better not say anything. We're guests." So I got out of my truck and went up to, oh no, it actually did mildew, thank God. So we were talking with the vineyard manager and the winemaker, and we're like, "Well, what's your kind of mildew program?" And "Oh yeah, we spray sulfur." "Well, what else?" "Well, we do all the other biodynamic sprays and all the other soil alkali materials and stuff like that." I said, "Well, what else do you use?" He said, "Sulfur." "That's pretty much it." So, "Well, what's your philosophy on when you stop using sulfur?" I said, "Well, what do you mean, what's my philosophy?" "Well, when do you get cut off?" He said, "When the grapes turn purple." And I said, "Are you kidding me? You're spraying wettable sulfur up until marination." He's like, "Yeah, why wouldn't I do that?" And I said, "You're a winemaker." And the winemaker says to me, he said, "Chris, don't your American winemakers know that most of your fermentation problems that have anything to do with sulfur or have nothing to do with the vineyard?" And I said, "Can you say that louder into this microphone?" And it was very interesting. And I will tell you, and then the second thing I learned that day was, I said, well, I didn't want to say anything. My buddy slugs me in the door. And I said, "I saw some mildew along the driveway." He said, "Oh, we get it there every year." I said, "Okay, well, it looked pretty much dead." "Oh yeah, we just sprayed some Calodrine on it and got it knocked down." "So what's your guys' philosophy about mildew?" And I said, "Well, let me tell you a story. We got this little corner block, like the driveway you drove in on, we had this little corner block of Clone 4 Chardonnay in a shady spot. And it gets mildew every year no matter what we do. And so one year, we said, what the heck, let's selectively pick around the mildew and get something out of the block. And then we sent the interns back and picked the other 2 tons of the most ugly mildewed stuff you've ever seen. And then we made that separately. Winemaker did everything normal that you would normally do with a few extra protocols, but at the end of the day, we made 2 lots, mildewed lot and non-mildewed lot. And then we blind tasted them. And nobody could tell the difference. I was like, "What? Can you say that into the microphone again?" He said, "Well, that was an extreme example. And certainly two different, completely competing philosophies with what we're used to here. I mean, every contract I have set is when we have to cut off wettable sulfur." So I thought that was very fascinating and a little challenging to some of our practices here. But what it did tell me was this. I remember in 2011, we picked some of the most disgusting Chardonnay, literally falling off the skin, off the rachis, and sent it to a very, very large winery that picked it and offered me $1,000 a ton for it. And it was the most embarrassing thing I've ever done in my life. There was no white in the bin, other than the macro bin itself. My guys called me and said, "How do you want us to pick this?" I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you can't actually get the knife in there because the slop falls off." So you gotta get the picture, right? Sent this to a large winery. And I called them, I said, "Hey, my apologies." And they said, "No, we know what's going on." And 4 months later, they called me and said, "We said we were gonna pay you $1,000 a ton, here's your check. We also promised you if it made the grade, we'd pay you full price." They said it made it into the main blend. And here's the check for the difference. I was like, A, I love you, and B, you are now screwed. And they said, "What do you mean?" I said, "If you can make wine out of that, you can make wine out of anything. So you've been very nice to me and I really appreciate it, but now I don't ever want to hear a complaint about botrytis, mildew, or rot, or anything, because that was the most disgusting stuff I've ever seen in my life, and you made wine." So that's my little lead into, I'm not saying we should make wine that way every year, nor do I believe that we ought to have mildew in our fruit or botrytis in our fruit, or weeds up, on the canopy. But I also do believe that things happen and we have techniques that can work. And we're maybe more sensitive about some of these issues than we probably need to. How many winemakers are there?
Was that white grape?
All right.
Was it white grape?
Forgive me, guys.
Was it white grape?
The ugly stuff, yeah, those are Chardonnay. So, I will say this, winemakers generally make their money and they're well paid and should be well paid because sometimes they have to do things that we don't know how to do. So they earn their money. But I also want to say that as we lead into more sustainable and organic practices, we probably have to learn to accept some things that we normally wouldn't. There's a malva there, there's some Bermuda grass over there, we've got a little bit of tritis here, I mean, in the far corner we've got a little bit of mildew. And maybe be a little bit more tolerant of some of those things than we normally would be. We don't need pristine, I don't need my organic apple to be shiny and perfectly red and no bug bites on it. I tolerate that in my organic apple, and I tolerate that in my organic peach, and my organic banana, and my organic lettuce, so why not in grapes? So, go ahead, Ron.
So what I would say is when you bring up 2011, you know, that was basically everybody, you know, without offending anybody, that was the prettiest person in the bar at 2 a.m.
Absolutely.
So everybody looked bad. That being said, that's not a free pass that like, hey, Chris said I can just let my vineyard go. Because all things being equal, if you're looking at somebody that's busting their butt and has clean fruit in the same, you know, across the avenue from you that's doing it haphazardly and you've got dirty fruit, which one would you prefer? So 2011 was like, yeah, it was like they picked, I like to say they picked the grapes with shovels.
Yeah.
We were like, it was a mess.
Yeah, point well made, and I'm not advocating for that. The whole management is not standing behind that. But I do think that it's important to remember the extremes and what's necessary and what's not necessary.
Right.
So, but I think there you've got something that communication with buyers is really important, and I think you need to tailor the messaging specifically when you're farming organically, or when you're in the transformation process, or you just need to you need to set the expectations and the rules on how it's going to work. And if somebody sees something that doesn't work for them, how do they proceed? I think sometimes as growers we fail to, we need to set the path correctly for our buyers to, I don't like this, who do I tell? I don't just go out and tell the first employee I see in the vineyard. There's ways to do it, and I think that's something that goes for any kind of farming, but with organic farming, it also depends if your buyer is savvy and knows what fruit he's buying. And savvy because they may not know the region, they may not know the conditions of the particular type of, maybe it's the first time they've bought Petaluma Gap fruit.
Yeah, it's the same for me. I try to if we have a new client coming on, I always prep them with our cultural practices so they can expect if they see a lot of weeds out there, I'll be like, oh, this is when we will do this. And I think it's a lot about communication. On the same hand, growing out here, it is cool and wet, but it's also really, really hot. And I have to make sure that people know that Pinot, they just are going through a constant struggle of cold and high heat all the time. So I like to prep people, because sometimes it doesn't look that beautiful in the bin once you pick it. But it is a lot about me telling a story first. But that's for anyone.
Go ahead.
Could you just talk a little bit about irrigation?
I'm sorry?
Irrigation, watering, how much,
And what
sustainability?
else do you want to talk about?
How much, well, is it possible, does anyone think, to get by without it?
No, I don't think
No, I don't think so.
Not
You
to
get by without it?
Oh.
Yeah.
Are your vines already established for a long
Yeah,
time?
depends where you are.
Depends
15
where you
years?
are.
Yeah, Quarter Ranch is dry farmed. Chileno Valley.
We were just talking today, we are out on Lakeville, and I noticed that we're significantly drier than this side of Chileno Valley. So even within, and that's one of the big things is the Petaluma Gap is still a large AVA. And you'll see different moisture levels and different, I come back from Santa Rosa, and it's raining over there, and it's not raining on Lakeville. It's really funny. We've tried all kinds of irrigations. We've tried long, deep, short, long, deep, and broader intervals. We've tried shorter and more frequently. It really I think that but I find it's one of the biggest things where people or the consumers have learned to say, oh, dry farmed is great. And it's a little bit like saying organic, it's just one sentence, but they don't really understand everything that's behind one statement.
Yeah. In my opinion, I've got some customers that, 80, 100-year-old vineyards dry farm, but they started out that way. A lot of it's dependent on the rootstock. So I think like you go around the Russian River or stuff you used to farm, if you can put water on it, yeah, you're gonna put water on it, just to take that management. And even, it's really interesting. I remember, side note, so again, I grew up farming. We used to grow cotton, and that was like back in the 80s, and the last, the drought in the 70s. Oh, cotton wastes water. How many acre feet? 2 to 3 acre feet of water. Grapes, I doubt even in a frost season we use an acre foot of water. Almonds, for instance, I think it's like 6 acre feet of water that they require. I think there was like something, remember back in the height of the drought, and I saw a documentary on this, like each nut consumes 1 gallon of water. So it's all relative. So can you farm, dry farm? Yeah, I don't know your site, maybe,
They haven't
potentially.
been watered in like 6 years.
Yeah, and it's, how did they handle the drought that we had a few years ago?
I wasn't there.
I
Okay.
think she just bought her coffee.
Oh, you just bought it.
So I would say it's dependent on 4 things. Your rootstock, your soil, is it clay, sandy loam, is it deep, is it shallow? What is your yield expectation? And why that's, and then what is your winery's expectation? In other words, if you're dealing with a winery that likes to pick at 26 bricks, but wants the acid and the tannin structure to be appropriate for 26 bricks, or are you dealing with a winery that wants 22 bricks and it's the same thing? So water is your friend or not your friend, depending on which winemaker you're dealing with there. If their expectation is to let it hang out to that really ripe, but they don't want it from dehydration, in other words, then you've got to irrigate it. But if they're willing to tolerate some dehydration and some higher acid, higher bricks, then maybe you don't need to irrigate at all or as much. I'll tell you a quick story. I mean, we farmed some of the oldest Zinfandel and Russian River on the Pioneer Flats. And we took over a vineyard that's planted in 1890s, Zinfandel. And, well, and some Carignan and some other things, but, and it had an irrigation system that consisted of a piece of hose there and a piece of hose there and a riser that was broken over there. And they got 1.5 tons of the most lovely wine you'd ever make. But they got 1.5 tons of it. And it was about 30% dead. But on St. George, the right rootstocks and Pioneer Flats, decent soil, deep enough, so it could do it. The very first thing we did is we fixed the existing irrigation system and then put a second hose, and we just did why we replanted. On the existing vineyard of 1.5 tons of beautiful fruit, when we added irrigation, we got 2.5 tons of beautiful fruit. So same wine quality, more fruit. Is that better? Well, the owner thought it was better. Is it more environmentally sensitive? That's up for debate, but it works. And we didn't do anything other than increase the quality of the same thing, and the vine showed for it. So, but how much water we put on, like Armin said, we did, I don't know, total of 10 gallons of wine over the course of the season, which is hardly anything. I mean, my garden uses more than that 10-acre block does. So.
Well, I would only add that, depending on where you are, the only thing you didn't mention is, do you have a water source?
Yeah.
I just would, do you have a choice of how, we don't always have the choice. So we have to be very smart.
You guys, what is your water source?
Rain ponds.
Same
So
here.
we have well, I won't go into my ranting, but we've tried to connect to the recycling water treatment plant with absolutely zero success. Actually, minus 20% success. And so we've had to learn, we've had to evaluate that our water reservoir needs to last at least for 2 years. So that's where we started our water management is how much water do we have for 2 years?
And that's a very good point you brought up when you talked about connecting to recycling water. So as you get closer to that urban-rural interface and you get the opportunity for recycled water, it's really super critical you test that water frequently because it changes different times of the year. With what's coming from the cities, you'll get different levels of things that aren't good for grapevines. And so, like in Napa, we find that the water coming from, the recycled water coming from the city of Napa tends to be really high pH water. And so that dictates a lot of things we have to do in the vineyard, even conventionally, with adjusting the water or the products we choose to put in there. Because high pH alkaline water is not beneficial to some of the chemistry we use. It degrades it. So.
What about salt?
Salts are really not good. Grapes don't like salt. Some of it, I mean, it varies from the year. Okay, so, and if you're using winery wastewater, so one of the aha moments, like I learned last year, winery, they're using the wastewater, recycling it, that we're finding, and this is in the heart of the Russian River, and we're finding that, and it's clay soil down below, we're finding like high amounts of boron and sodium in the soil. The well water's good. The wastewater was like brine. You could cure olives in it. And what we found out, the winery was using sodium borate as their cleansing product. So sodium borate is high salt, high boron, two things that will nuke your vineyard. And there are other options. Potassium hydroxide is an excellent cleaner. It's just more expensive. So it's just, so water, grapes don't use that much, but if you put the wrong kind, the wrong amount of it, you'll get like a lethal dose, or it'll really tweak your vineyard. There's places in Alexander Valley that are unplanted because there's high boron in the water, in the soil. It's just, it's built up over time.
Can I ask a housekeeping question? I think we're close on time. I just want to make sure we're not dominoing anything with talks. These questions are pretty good.
I have one question before.
Yes.
I'm curious about the certification process. Being an organic vineyard, I get a lot of questions from smaller growers like, oh, how much does it cost to certify? And I don't know because I didn't do it. I just maintain, and I'm kind of curious to you.
We not even there yet.
Okay. Yeah, because everyone always sees other people say, oh, it's just too expensive. I just can't certify. And for me, it's not actually that expensive right into my budget. It's not a crazy amount. But
Yeah, when I certified, the most expensive part was just my time filling out the form.
yes, oh yeah, the compliance side.
Yeah, the actual dollars
Yeah.
to pay CCOF or
And there's programs they can get buyback programs and stuff like that, but I just.
And does it also dovetail with your sustainability certification?
Yeah, it can. Yeah.
So you can use the work you're putting, it goes in the
For
bowl.
sure, exactly.
The really cool thing about being CCOF certified here is that with FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, that we have to use as an olive oil processing facility, you know, with our producing a product. A lot of our compliance that we've done over the years of record keeping for being organic just flows right into that audit for FSMA, which is really great. I mean, there's a lot more work to do, but it is a nice thing, an advantage if I, provide any besides the philosophical.
And I would say, one thing that Scott and I were talking about earlier is that the certified name, putting organic grapes on your label is like the penultimate step in the whole process. But there may be ways for you still to get some bang from your buck and all of your time and energy if maybe you're not certified organic, but you're doing 99% of it, and still be able to create some language on the bottle that gives you some credit for that. but not actually go to that next step. Because a lot of the fear that I find with people that want it, or interested in organics is like, they feel like their hands are tied once they get certified. And to a certain extent, you are. You're prohibited from doing certain things. A spray, a fertilizer, whatever the technique would be. So I would throw that out there, especially if the bottles are hand sold. You have that opportunity to craft language that's beneficial, but not tie your hands on being certified. I have a number of vineyards that we do 99% of all the organic things. We just spray elevate for botrytis, for example. I think there's opportunities in wine that doesn't exist in bananas or oats or soybeans for that kind of thing. So I'll throw that out there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think we partner with a lot of vineyards that are 99% organic. Maybe they're farming completely organically. They just don't want to have their hands tied. And so having that relationship and this long-term partnership with them, we know all about their farming, and so that becomes part of the conversation when we are hand selling these bottles. So I think there's an opportunity there, and I think whether or not you have that CCOF stamp, I think for me, I don't want to bring biodynamics too much into the conversation because it's a whole other conversation. But I think for me, one of the biggest benefits of having the organic mindset in farming is that really what you're doing is building your soil. And I don't think it could be more important anywhere than on these really heavy clay soils. Because you're bringing life into your soils, and you're bringing diversity, and you're letting microbial life do a lot of work for you in terms of getting different nutrients that wouldn't be available otherwise, or creating fungal networks that access nutrients that are farther away from your root system, with mycorrhizal associations. And so building that healthy soil is so key to growing a healthy grapevine. Yes?
That's my big question about undervine management is relative to having 2 feet of grass versus a regimen where you have to keep it no more than 6 inches, can't really support a substantial grass root system, can't support above ground thatch and biomass, none of the carbohydrates being fed into that soil by a good grass stand that you can then knock down with glyphosate. I mean, that balance doesn't get addressed very much. I mean, I sort of feel better about having a hellacious stand of grass there and then being able to knock it down, even if that means using glyphosate. And I still have a hellacious stand of grass there, which suggests to me that it's sustainable. I mean,
I gotta say, I use glyphosate and I still have a hellish stand of grass.
well, that's what I mean. I mean, it's not damaging the soil that I can see because it's growing very vigorously there.
Yeah, well, I think whether, we're not gonna solve the glyphosate question here today. I think that the point is that we're heading more in a direction away from that, and I think as an industry we are. I think for good reason. I'm not a big fan of Monsanto, but I probably own some of their stock on my 401k somewhere. So, but I have to talk about both sides of my mouth. But I think the nice thing about where we're at today is that one, the consumers are pushing, and the industry or the wineries, my consumers are pushing me. They're getting pressure from the consumer, so it's pushing us in a way that weed slayer is maybe an option. Sheep may become a more economic option. And I think as long as we're heading that way, I think that's the important thing, is that we're all heading in a positive way. But I think the discussion is really important. Do you need to have a clean vineyard? I mean, does it hurt that you've got an oak or, God forbid, a Malva sitting in the middle of the vineyard somewhere? Is that going to really hurt wine quality? Let's talk about that. That's more important to me than what are you spraying, how often are you spraying. It's like, why does it need to be clean? Nature's not clean. Nature's pretty messy sometimes. It's beautiful, but it's kind of messy.
Where did this landscaped idea for what a vineyard should look like come from?
Exactly.
And why is that important?
Exactly.
We need to break that.
Armin?
On that, you bring up a really good point. It's one of the most frustrating things for me is, people want that manicured, like pavement look, and weeds, even tillage, it's any of those things like building organic matter, you know, to me, I've gotten frustrated with people, I gotta get compost. So bringing in compost as opposed to growing your own compost with your cover crop. And one of the ahas for me was I've got a customer with ranches in Alexander Valley and Slusser Road. And we gotta get loads of compost in here. I gotta build the organic matter up in Alexander Valley. And one year we stockpiled 6 truckloads and they're like a quarter mile from the river. The river came up and all the compost wound up down out to the river. When we're looking at trying to grow this, we're analyzing the soil. There's stuff in Alexander Valley, minimal organic matter, no nutrients in the soil. There's stuff on Slusser Road, the same cover crop we planted grew 3 foot tall. It's got 2% organic matter and has loads of nutrients in the soil. And the difference is, one is no-till, one is tilled. And the mindset was like, hey, let's not try to plant, you know, we're not going to bring in compost to put this out here. Let's put some nutrients out when we plant our cover crop. Let's try to actually grow the cover crop. I think Pauline's book, they talk about that, is grow your cover crop to enrich your soil. Interesting book I'm in the process of reading called 1493, and it talks about what happened after Columbus discovered and how it affected globally. Some of the worst erosion that still affects us now happened in the mid-1500s in China because they were not letting people farm on the river bottoms. They were sending them up in the hills. So they'd go and cut all the trees down, they'd go and cut all the brush out and build terraces. And then when you got a rain, everything, all of that stuff eroded and moved away. And they wound up denuding, this ground is still not farmable. Like almost 1,000 years later.
And that has nothing to do with conventional.
It has nothing to do with conventional. There wasn't Roundup invented at the time. So it's the things, every action's got an equal and opposite, sometimes even greater reaction. So if you have to go out there, like thinking about the guy from Pisces and thinking about you trying to grow in this area, is you have to think about what the end in mind is that you're looking for and how you're going to get there. And it's talk to your neighbors. Talk to what works in the San Joaquin Valley is not going to work here in the Petaluma Gap. What works in Alexander Valley or Napa is probably not going to work here. So it's more of these things that you can do and experiment and think about how you can make these better. Because a lot of the actions you take, they have long-term effects. And it's just, it's thinking about it and making a calculated decision about those things is so critical.
So Stacy, at Deloche and Raymond, what's the current company attitude about the vineyard floor in summer going into harvest with visitors to the tasting room?
The vineyard floor.
Is it clean or is there residue, or whatever term you want to
Oh,
use?
so we, because we run a Clemens, and that's our main
In the vine row.
weed management in the vine row. We can't move to a full no-till system. We have we do alternate till, and you know I don't get any pushback. We keep things relatively mowed, but we run the Clemens a couple times a year, and it's not about being clean. It's not about being manicured, and that's never been a conversation that's been brought to me. You know, those aren't particularly deep soils, so I do like to, you know, alleviate some of the competition that you would get from letting it really grow out of control, but it's not a main focus of what we do.
The one question that I think I'd like to know about is the wine quality better? Organic grapes.
Well, let's see.
That's a really hard
So here's the problem I asked them. same clone next door neighbors to each other. And I think I can take you to vineyards like that where Smith is always better than Jones, and I farm both of them. And I farm them both the same way. It has nothing to do with the farming obviously good farming, but the soil's the same, the clone's the same, your side's the same. Well, what the heck's the difference? Winemaker A makes it this way, and winemaker B makes it a different way, and which one's better? So I think the only real fair way to answer that is you have to have the same block that's relatively uniform, made by the same person for multiple years in a row to be able to answer that question. Because any other answer to that question is going to be completely subjective based on vintage, winemaker, farmer, soil, all the other thousands of things. Because we're not dealing with corn in Iowa, that really the only thing you care about is how much sugar is in it and is it rotten. We're dealing with such a subjective product that you got to be really careful when you ask that question, is to isolate the organicness of it from the non-organicness.
So the answer is you don't know.
The answer is I think it completely depends.
Can you think of any examples where somebody converted from conventional to organic, where all the conditions were the same consistently through the process and was an improvement in the quality of the wine?
I mean, I've heard anecdotally that yes, it does improve the quality of the wine, but there's no true research that I've seen.
Well, and it's still so
I think-
subjective.
I think you're looking at the question the wrong way. You've got to ask is it more valuable to the consumer and stuff like that? Not is it better or not, because it's your own opinion. You can think wine A is better than B and whatnot. Is it more valuable to you and the consumer is how you should be looking at it. Can you get more money for it?
And I think that's where our consumer in this room are winemakers, right? That's our clients. And I think that's who you need to have the conversation. And we've seen our canopy thrive better, but I think it's 50% maybe because it's organic, and the other 50% is because we're devoting a different kind of attention to the vineyard. So I think that the culture change that has happened for us, starting from the family, the owners, down to the team, even, we have our own crew, so they can't go to their go-to tool shed. They have to, every time they face any pressure, they have to go back and say, what am I, they don't know what to use. So the uncertainty is a big step, and the culture change in finding somebody who you can rely on for advice that gives you, that kind of walks you through is important. But I think it is a culture change that, that's the first thing that happens, without going into biodynamics, it also makes you focus more, because you've got to be on top of your vineyard a lot more than you are with conventional. And I think that's the biggest mindset change that does get better quality fruit, or does produce better quality fruit.
And maybe also, with that attention that you're giving to your vineyard, are you getting more years of life out of your vineyard? So are you seeing that value on the back end as well? And that's a really hard thing to answer, but I believe it.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the quality of farming. Joan, I'm going to interrupt real quick. Just to answer your question from my personal perspective, if you have to be a better farmer if you have fewer tools. So I think that can translate into wine quality, but it has nothing to do with the fact of whether you use spray Roundup or not. I think it has more of an effect of, I'm not even really focusing on that, I'm focusing on the other 95 things we should be doing better. And I'm spending more time with the vineyard, the best.
Yeah, but you don't have to worry about the weeds that Roundup killed. You can spend time doing better things elsewhere too. So rather than spending the time, how many times do we have to go through the vineyard with the machine? You can do other things. You can pull leaves, you can do canopy, you can do other things. You have more time to do other things. So I mean, there's a trade-off there too, that I don't necessarily think that because you're doing organic stuff, you're there more. You're still in the vineyard.
Yeah. All things being equal, more things are happening in an organic vineyard. At least 2 more sprays, probably more cultivation of some sort, whether it's spraying weed slayer or sheep or whatever the thing is. So I'm of the opinion that just because you call yourself organic could mean you, and back in my early days, organic wine sucked. My opinion. They were bad.
Organic wines are wines made with organic grapes.
There you
They're
go.
different.
So that's another thing. So I think the potential is both ways, is my opinion. I think the same vineyard farmed more smartly and using more sustainable sort of organic practices has the ability to make better wine. But you've got to have a good winemaker, you have to have all that stuff too. It's not just that one thing, whether you spray Roundup or apply compost or not. I think it's a bigger question.
And I think it's totally possible to farm organically and farm completely,
Numbskully.
Exactly. You can go out there and you can make poor decisions and farm organically, and I don't think that that's going to benefit your land.
Joan, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, that's okay. I know it's a hard question to answer when you're talking about grapes and wine, but I have to ask myself, which tastes better? The ugly peach that I get at the farmer's markets or the beautiful one that's sitting in the supermarket?
Right.
Or what about the beautiful one you get at the farmer's market?
Well, they're never as beautiful.
Those tomatoes are pretty good.
The ones in the supermarket are more beautiful and they're larger.
All right,
They
so
don't
jump
taste
in.
good. That's good. That's right.
So there are some measurable aspects of grapes, like that quality, acid sugar levels and things like that. So then maybe a better question is, do conventional sprays affect those chemistries in a different way than organic products? And does anyone know the answer to that? Potassium
And
levels.
again, you have to have, you have to have apples to apples to compare it. We don't have that. Really.
Well, I think the answer is yes, but I think it depends on which material you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's not just organic, it's like which organic and when did you apply it and how did you apply it. So I would say this, conventional chemistry, and Armin can back me up, is, how did my oil organic instructor used to talk about it? He said, it's like drinking Gatorade or eating a banana. So which do you want? If your sugar level is going crazy, like mine go, when I get hungry, I get angry. So if I need an immediate fix, I need the Gatorade. But that doesn't last me very long. So can you do a foliar spray of something to fix something right now? Yeah, you can. You get that initial shot, which is better, the banana. The banana is better for me. So do I want the banana so I'm not hungry? Or do I just fix what I've got? So there's conventional things that'll fix anything. And so that makes it easy and sometimes cheaper.
And I think it goes back to being that detailed farmer, as we were saying with organic. You have to be incredibly detail oriented and on every single issue. For example, we make a lot of compost here at the ranch, but I don't put it on the vines anymore because of the high potassium levels. So I can't just be like, oh, we're organic, we put compost everywhere. I have to be, I think, very considerate towards every block. And I wouldn't have done that in previous jobs where we have 1,000 acres where I put compost and everything. So there's just more detail. And it's a smaller ranch, but I'd really be curious to look. I've met the guys up in Mendocino, the Fetzer family. I would love to learn more about their costing per acre and how they deal with
What?
their cost per acre and everything like that. I'm just throwing it out there. Big farming is.
Careful, Armin.
I really want to hear this.
Well, I can tell you in the early days, I used to get in verbal fisticuffs with Ann because she used to say that their farming practices organically were no different than their conventional. Like, how is that possible? Well, we run this Clemens at 85 miles an hour and we sulfur dust and we don't have to worry about botrytis. It's like, oh. And you've got really beautiful ground where you don't have to worry about fertilizer. Well, now I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's one big piece of a small piece of a very big pond. We're in Petaluma Gap, right? That's what we're talking about. Can you do that here?
I remember Doug Gubler when he was still alive telling me one time, use my mildew model, it's fail safe. We went 30 days with the sulfur application. Well, Doug, where'd you do that? In Hopland.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like, it was like 100 degrees for like the month of July up there. Yeah, of course, you're not going to sulfur dust. If you're valley bottom, like that loamy river bottom ground, yeah, you can get away with it. It's just, I can't speak anymore. I can't.
I have an organic vineyard we just took over on the top, in the middle of nowhere in Casadero. The very, very famous Pinot Noir vineyard. And the way the owner used to spray it was he would get on his riding lawnmower backpack, and he would drive with one arm, and he would spray sulfur with the other. And I said, Donnie, are you freaking kidding me? You sprayed all 5 days. How long did it take you? About 4 days. I was like, are you kidding me? Nope. What, is there another way to do it? And I was like, oh boy. And I said, how many times do you spray? 4. I said, Cazadero gets 100 and some odd inches of rain. So then I went to the winemaker. I'm like, winemaker, do you ever see mildew? Never. Botrytis? Never. I'm like, hallelujah. So we found a spot in the middle of the most mildew country you would think that doesn't get mildew because he sprays it 4 times a year with wettable sulfur. So is it possible? Yeah, but can I use that model to the other 500 acres we farm and go, shoot. All right, guys, get the backpack out and get your riding lawnmower out and just spray this one poor Chardonnay 4 times and expect it to be clean. I mean, I don't know how that happened.
We work with an old vine Zinfandel vineyard that doesn't get sprayed. It's in like Windsor area, just off of like Mark West, and the owner never sprays it. It doesn't get mildew. Who knows what's going on there? But it's a miracle. It happens.
But I don't know how our time is, but the other thing is, I think you can't make rash decisions when you're farming organically. You can't correct immediately, and I think that's something, when you were talking about compost, it's like when we quoted compost is not expensive, it's getting it to your vineyard that is expensive.
And putting it out.
And so if you some of these things that we'll talk about sound really great, but when you go down and look at the numbers, okay, that doesn't fit into my plan. So I think that you can't make hasty, you can't train, it's a long road and it's an ongoing road, and you can't change courses that easy, which you can do in conventional. I think that's one of the, tying your hands, I guess that's also what it means.
I think we're kind of over time.
Yeah, we're to the end of the session. Wow, I've been wanting to have this conversation for about 4 years, and finally we got together for the Petaluma Gap. So I'm really pleased. I want to thank our panel here for coming. Well, information that I wish I could stay here all day and just keep talking about it and talking about it. I want to ask Dan Aguiar from Mechanics Bank if he wants to say a word. Are you interested in staying up? He's our sponsor for today's event. I failed to do that at the beginning.
Do you finance differently for organic?
The same numbers. Thanks for being here. We're delighted. This is the second year that Mechanics Bank has been the sponsor of this 4 seminars, grower series, and this content today was exceptional. Thanks again to all of you. And we're delighted to be a sponsor. We're very pleased with our role here and to be supporting the Petaluma Gap. I will take a minute to brag a little bit. You may have heard the news that Mechanics Bank is acquiring most of the California operations of Rabobank later this year. There was a press release. So by the end of the year, you can go from a $6 billion bank to about a $17 billion bank, and go from about 44 offices and branches statewide to 144. Most of what we're going to pick up is in the Central Coast and in the Central Valley. So our involvement and support of agriculture, including vineyards and wineries, is going to go up by a factor of 2 or 3. So that's good news for us, good news for our clients. So again, thanks to everybody for being here today.
Thanks for being a sponsor.